Welcome to our latest video series called Roof of the World, and today we're in Kuala Lumpur, one of the most incredibly significant cities in Southeast Asia, and we're with the great Joel Burden, who'll be taking us around the sights of the city, taking us to the highest point, the most dramatic highest point within the city, and sharing a message directly from his heart to yours. You're going to absolutely love it. This is Roof of the World.
Hey everyone, Joel here in Kuala Lumpur, and today I'm going to take you to the highest point in my city. So while we have a look around today, I've been asked to share a message that's been on my heart recently. And you know, someone once said, don't spend your energy trying to change what you do, but spend your energy trying to discover who you are. Because ultimately everything that you do flows out of who you are. And Paul gives us a clue to who we are in 2 Corinthians 5 when he says that we are Christ's ambassadors. And that explains who we are in relationship to God and who we are in relationship to the world. So come with me today, let's talk about being ambassadors of Christ. So if you're not really in the world of government and politics, you might not really have much of an idea about what that word ambassador is really all about. Well, an ambassador is a representative of their home nation who lives in a foreign land. They are from one culture, but they live and work in another. And I guess the reason why I want to share this with you is because me and Em have a unique understanding of this. We are from England, but we live in a foreign culture here in Malaysia, and we love it here. Looking around, you would not see much visual difference between us and the rest of the people in Malaysia. We dress the same, we like the same foods, we hang out in the same places. You probably noticed that we're about the same height as most Malaysians here, so we blend in pretty well. But there are certain moments where that home culture of Britishness just can't help but ooze out, such as the royal wedding the other week. When no one else in Malaysia is celebrating the royal wedding, Emma and I are just having the best time cooking a full roast dinner, celebrating Harry and Meghan in our Union Jacks, singing God Save the Queen. And in a moment like that, a Malaysian would look at us and see that we have a different world on the inside of us. And it's the same for all of us. The moment that you accept Jesus Christ, there is a different world on the inside of you. Because you're no longer a citizen of this world, you become a citizen of the culture of the kingdom of heaven. Your territory changes from this culture to the culture of the kingdom of heaven, and there's a different world on the inside of you. And that means that you're never going to fully feel at home in the culture that you're in right now. Probably means that you're going to be a slightly odd fit in your lecture hall or your office. You're going to have different desires and different understandings because there's a different world on the inside of you. I think we're going to have to become okay with not fully feeling at home. But secondly, just like me and Em, that means you're going to want to bring your home culture to the world around you. You're going to want to celebrate the things of your home kingdom with the world around you. And so we are ambassadors of Christ. There's a 2 different culture world happening on the inside of us. And we're called now by God to stand in the middle of those 2 cultures and bring the things of our home kingdom to the world around us. Okay, so we're at our first stop. This is the famous dim sum in Jalan Ipoh. This is where the Malaysians eat their breakfast. And we've got all sorts of great breakfast here. We're having some Milo ice. Check out this one here. It's like a marshmallow. It's called a pao. Inside, you open this thing up, and it's got sweet char siu pork inside. So we're gonna have some breakfast here, and then we're gonna head on around the rest of the city. Paul's talking in 2 Corinthians in the time of the Roman Empire. And in that time, they would have had a different concept of ambassadors. Because as the Roman Empire was expanding into new regions, the Romans would send forward representatives into those new regions to challenge them about joining the Roman Empire. And those regions had two options. They could either submit or they could fight back and challenge. And interestingly, ambassadors were only sent into places where there was challenge and conflict. They were sent ahead not to have military might and fight by the power of the sword, but actually to build relationships with the region, to win over the hearts and minds of the people in that area. And in the same way, we're not winning over the world with forcing people into submission. We're winning people over with building relationships by gaining understanding and listening to the world around us. You know, there's a UK ambassador to Cuba. His name is Tim Cook, and he said this in an article. He said the real skill of a diplomat abroad is to put themselves in someone else's shoes, to gain understanding, to listen, to read between the lines, and to find common ground. And I think that is a perfect picture of what it means to be an ambassador of Christ. We're here to listen first to our city, to gain understanding from that listening, and then the understanding creates influence. And over that influence, we can then challenge and implore people, be reconciled to Jesus Christ. Everything for an ambassador begins with relationship. So this here behind me is the Independence Square, right in the center of KL. And this is the place in 1957 that they first brought up that Malaysian flag to mark the start of the new independence of the nation. And this has a lot of historical buildings all around it, but kind of nice memories for me is that my grandparents were here in that time of independence, and they remember this day where Malaysia celebrated getting its independence for the first time. So not only is it historical, but I guess it's got a lot of personal history to it as well. So we're going to have a quick look around here. This is our second stop in KL. That clock tower is beautiful there, isn't it? So an ambassador lives abroad, but he is resourced from his home nation. And that means that he draws all of his wealth and provision, financial support, wisdom back from his home nation. That's quite remarkable because it means that an ambassador can be sent to a country, say, that is bankrupt, but the ambassador won't feel the effects of it because he'll be able to draw his resource from his home nation. He could be sent to a country that's experiencing famine, but he will eat the food of his home nation. In one sense, the ambassador can be all sorts of problems. There could be problems with fuel, there could be conflict, there could be poverty, but the ambassador to that country is unaffected by the environment because he's resourced from somewhere else. And that's so true for us. You know, you and I as ambassadors of Christ, we are cared for and sustained for from somewhere else. We can draw all of our resources from our home nation. You know, when I was a student at university, the first year, I was learning how to manage my finances and how to spend money, and I messed it up the first month. I spent all of my money on stupid items, and I had no money left to buy any food. And in my fridge, it was completely empty. There's nothing there, a couple of old apples. So I did what every student should do. I took out my phone and I called my mummy. I said, "Mummy, I need some help. I'm in a bit of trouble." And through a quick online shop, she went up and she pulled up Tesco Direct, and there at my door arrived all this abundance of home comforts. And I could fill my fridge with the best produce. I could eat like a king. Even though I was just a broke student. And we can actually draw resource from home even when we're away from home. Our environment can be one of lack, but we can live in the abundance of our kingdom. You know, that's why we as ambassadors of Christ, we can live generous lives no matter what circumstance we see around ourselves. We don't have to be affected by the culture around us. We can live above the environment and we can draw our resource from heaven. You can be generous in the midst of lack and abundance because you know that you're pulling your resource from another place. I love just seeing that picture of Jesus in Mark 5. He's in a boat and the environment is chaos. There's waves battering against that boat. But you see Jesus in the middle of that environment, sleeping on a cushion in the middle of a storm. And that's like you and me, in the middle of any environment. We don't have to live subject to the environment that we're in. We can be at perfect peace because we're drawing our resource and our security from our home kingdom. So we're in the car now, just traveling further down towards our end destination, and classic bit of Malaysian traffic that we're in. Somewhere behind these buildings over here, we have a bunch of the embassies in KL. And an embassy is a funny place. It's a slice of land that is technically owned and governed by a foreign country. And authorities here in Malaysia can't just go into any embassy. They're protected places, heavily guarded. In fact, I think you need permission to go into any embassy, even if you're going to put out a fire. You need permission from that embassy in order to enter. So it's a place that's governed really from somewhere else. And thinking about ambassadors, you know, the church is the embassy of the kingdom of heaven on earth. Wherever you find a local church, you find a place that is full of the rule and reign of the kingdom of heaven. The church is built by and guarded and protected by Jesus Christ himself. And so the church acts a little bit like our embassy. And embassies have a number of functions similar to the church. First of all, an embassy is a place of refuge for citizens of that country who are stuck abroad. I don't know if you've ever got into trouble abroad or lost your passport. If you have, then you'll find an embassy is like a great thing to find. They offer help and support. It's a place really that helps connect you back home again. And that's our job as the church. When the citizens of the kingdom of heaven here on planet Earth, we're helping people navigate the challenges of life and ultimately point them back home again. The embassy also has a function to support the work of the ambassadors. It's training people up and releasing them into their calling. And the church is a place of training. It's not here to get something from you, it's here to give something to you, to release you into your work. And the embassy ultimately is there not for the good of itself or its home country, it's there for the country and the city in which it lives in. And that's the same with the church. It's not inward looking, it's outward looking. It looks beyond its own borders to the good and the welfare of the city that's around it in order to support it and bring good to it. So we can't be just a club of ambassadors, diplomats hanging out in church. We're actually here for the good and the training of the world around us. The embassy without the ambassador is no good at all. The ambassador without the embassy is weak. But together, the embassy and the ambassador together is an unstoppable force, bringing a lot of hope to the city in which it's in. Okay, so we're going to jump out here. And just up here is VCR Cafe. It's a really great coffee house right in the city centre. And in 2014, when we first came to Malaysia, Em and I spent tons of time here drinking coffee, using up all of their Wi-Fi. So we're going to go inside and I'll show you around.
Are you here at all? It's a miracle. It's a miracle. It's a miracle.
The world's largest latte. So an embassy may have many diplomats that fly in and fly out on short-term projects, but the ambassador is different. The ambassador is a permanent resident of the host country which he goes to. So perhaps the ambassador would be there for many years of his life. He may send his kids to school in that city. He may really put his roots down and immerse himself in the culture for a long period of time. And in the same way, the Bible doesn't describe us as temporary visitors to earth. We're actually here for the long term. Our mindset and our view about our life here on earth is not that of a tourist or a visitor. It's that of a resident who puts his roots down and makes this place his home. And we came to KL twice in 2014. Me and Em came the first time, we came as tourists. And that trip over about 5 days was just rushing from landmark to landmark, taking selfies, into taxis, into hotels, back out, jumping on a plane and then going home. And the whole atmosphere of the whole trip was just rushed. But then we came back again a second time, and this time we came back as long-term residents. We came back to move here. And it's amazing the stuff that you suddenly see when you actually live in a country, when you immerse yourself here, where you have the advantage of time to build relationships. And that's what God wants us to do as ambassadors. We're not here with a short-term mindset, we're here as long-term residents. You know, in the church, sometimes we can feel a little bit like we're temporary visitors here on earth. and you know, somehow we're just passing through life, waiting to get to heaven. And I think sometimes that's unhelpful for the way that we view the world around us. We see perhaps evangelism as rushing from person to person, trying to somehow push people towards Christ and drag as many people as we can to heaven with us. But that's not the viewpoint we need to have for really successfully reaching out to the world around us. We need to think long term. We're with people for long term. Every divine connection that we meet is a long-term relationship, and we're building with them over a long period of time. We're not pushing people to Christ. We are loving people day by day. We're not looking for quick fixes for everything in our world. We're thinking about long-term change, things that outlive our lifetime. I love that view with evangelism, that everyone's on a scale 1 to 10, and 10 is the moment where they actually make a decision to have a relationship with Jesus. 1, it's quite far away, and we may be, you know, step 9 to step 10 where we see someone make a decision. But most people in your life, it's probably just taken them from step 3 to 4 or step 6 to 7. And I love that idea because it just liberates us from having to always push people across this line. There'll be people who loved them before us, and there's going to be many people who love them afterwards. We're part of a much bigger story when it comes to the people in our world. We're here not as tourists, but we're here as long-term residents. So this is Bukit Nanas, our third stop in our KL tour, and Bukit Nanas translates as Pineapple Hill. So this is a big hill in the city centre of KL. The whole of KL used to look like this. I mean, it was rainforest, and then in came the bulldozers and created highways and buildings and skyscrapers, but this is literally a reserved patch of rainforest right in the centre. And in a couple of minutes, you'll see as we get to the top of this hill, that's where our final destination is, the KL Tower, the highest viewing platform. So let's go through Bukit Nanas. Okay, so we're in the middle of this Bukit Nanas rainforest right now. It is really hot and I'm getting bitten alive. You know, an ambassador is there to export the things of his home culture to the foreign nation which he resides. He's there to export the values, the wealth, the policies of his home culture. And at the same time, the ambassador's also trying to stop unwanted things being imported from the foreign nation back home. So for example, an ambassador might work with the host country to find solutions to unwanted drug smuggling, money laundering, illegal weapons, immigration problems. They're there to export the things of their culture, and they're there to prevent unwanted importing of those things back home. And it makes me wonder if there is a direction to the job of the ambassador, if it's supposed to be inside out. I wonder how good I am sometimes at preventing the unwanted things of the culture around me being absorbed into my heart. Like, how good am I in the office sometimes at not absorbing the negative vibes, or not absorbing the fears or the doubts of the voices of the people around me? You know, Proverbs says it like this. It says, guard your heart, for everything that you do flows from it. And that means that there's supposed to be a direction. It's supposed to be your heart out, the kingdom of your culture out, not outside in. And Proverbs is telling us that the way that we stop absorbing the world around us is to put up a guard. And there are healthy guards that we can put up in our life as ambassadors to stop the wrong things being imported back home. We can guard ourselves visually, stop looking at the wrong things that are going to get absorbed into our heart, guard ourselves verbally to stop the wrong voices from speaking in. And you are an ambassador of the kingdom of heaven. Our job is to bring the things of our home culture into the world around us. Okay, finally back to the city. Okay, now onto our final area. Here it is, KL Tower. So the role of the ambassador comes with authority. Authority to carry a mission and a message from your home kingdom. And I don't know, when I think about authority, I think, well, who am I to speak on behalf of God? And Paul said the same thing in 2 Corinthians. He speaks about himself not feeling like an eloquent speaker or feeling somehow inferior, feeling the least of the apostles. Every other apostle is up here, but Paul's down here. But then he goes on to say, but amongst all of that, I have the authority from Jesus Christ to speak this message. And you have more authority than you realize as an ambassador of Christ. You know, if I'm to stand out in the street down here and try and stop the traffic with my own hand, bearing in mind that these are crazy Malaysian drivers, I would get knocked down very easily. But if I stand out there and I'm dressed like a police officer, I get my little police badge out and I stand there and then I try and stop the traffic with the badge, all of a sudden the cars would come to a halt because I have a little bit more authority than I did on the first time. I have the full weight of the police force and the government behind me, helping me in that act. And in the same way, you have way more authority than you realize. There's way more backing you up than you realize. You have authority to speak on behalf of God. Jesus was trying to show Peter this when Jesus is getting arrested in the garden. And Peter draws out his sword to try and stop Jesus from being arrested. Jesus says, Peter, stop. If you don't realize, I have authority. If I wanted to get out of this situation, I could just call on 12 legions of angels. That's 12,000 angels to step in right at this moment and prevent this from happening. Jesus is trying to say to Peter that I have authority. If I want to use it, if I want backup, I can have that at any moment. And I feel like it's time for us as ambassadors to realize the authority that Christ has given to us. You know, in the early church, people would look at sick people and they would just say, you know what, in my own strength, I don't feel strong, but in Christ, in the authority that's been given to me, in the name of Jesus, get up and be healed. And people would stand up from all sorts of illnesses and sicknesses. Demons would be cast out. In some instances, even dead people start up and begin to walk again because they had authority, not their own strength, but they were stepping in the strength of their home kingdom. You're not just an ordinary person. You are an ambassador of Jesus Christ, an ambassador of the kingdom of heaven, and you have authority behind you to make all sorts of things happen. You're not just an ordinary person. You're filled with the same spirit that rose Christ from the dead. There is an authority behind you as an ambassador of Jesus Christ. So here we are, our last, fourth, final stop here in KL, and this is the KL Tower, 400 meters high. It's the tallest viewing platform in the whole of KL. So we're going to head up to the top and I'm going to show you what the view's like. I know, it's amazing, isn't it? So here it is, the highest point in KL. This is the highest viewing platform, 400 and something meters high. Check out the views from here. You can see every corner of the city. So an ambassador is the face of their country, and we're actually the face of God, which is just so much pressure to be under. Like, to think every single day we're representing God to every person who we meet in our world. For me, the pressure of that just feels enormous. I was laughing with our church the other week. You know, I was running a bit late for the service. Henry was up in the morning doing his whole baby routine thing, and I'm rushing to church like as fast as I can go, and there's this car in front of me that is just getting in the way. Gets to the traffic lights outside of church and the light goes green, but the car doesn't move, so I lose it. I slam my horn on, beep, and force this car to move out of the way, probably give him some kind of gesture. And then the car turned into our church car park. And it turns out this car is one of our newer visitors to church on that Sunday. And it was so embarrassing. I apologized and laughed it off. It's one of those Sundays you quickly check your message and make sure there's no references to patience and long suffering and those kind of things. But it just made me realize there's just so many moments where we represent God so badly. And you know, I'm thinking, why does God choose imperfect people to represent him? He could do it himself. He could represent himself with the 12,000 legions of angels. He could do whatever to represent, but instead he chooses broken, fractured, imperfect people. And then I realized that the reason he chooses us is because imperfect people is exactly who the kingdom of heaven is for. We don't gain access to this kingdom through good works or right living or a perfect track record. We get into this kingdom because of the goodness and the grace of Jesus Christ. You know, the best people to talk about the grace of God to others is people who've needed it themselves so much. And that's what qualifies us as ambassadors. You know, if you feel like shying away from sharing the message of Christ with your world because of the way that you've lived, well, it's the wrong way. You are qualified. You are an ambassador of Christ because of the grace and goodness of Jesus to be who you could not be and do what you could not do for yourself. And I just think it's time for us all across the world to be liberated from that feeling, to start rising up and spread the love of Jesus to our cities. Our cities are waiting for the ambassadors of Jesus to rise up and spread the message of love, good news, the grace, the gospel of Jesus. And I believe as we do that, we're going to see some amazing things happen in every corner of the world, every Hope City location, in Jesus' name.